Welcome back to Verbal Sparring. On today's video, we will be recapping Bellator San Diego and UFC Vegas 97. We will be combining them today. We will talk about Usman Nurmagomedov defending his lightweight championship in Bellator, and we will talk about Sean Brady getting the biggest victory of his career in the UFC. We will touch on some of the other big performances from each card before we head on out today as well, and we will start with the lone title fight of the weekend in Bellator, Usman Nurmagomedov, and still. 26 years of age, 18 victories, 0 defeats, 14 finishes, 2 successful title defenses. The resume is coming together for Usman Nurmagomedov, carrying on the legacy of that last name. His cousin, Khabib Nurmagomedov, finishes a perfect 29-0 UFC lightweight champion, numerous title defenses, the biggest pay-per-view in UFC history. His brother, Umar Nurmagomedov, is on the short list to be the next number one contender in the bantamweight division of the UFC following this coming weekend's fight between Sean O'Malley and Merab Dvalishvili. And in Bellator, Usman Nurmagomedov is dominating and running through the entirety of the 155-pound division. And he does it again here on Saturday night in San Diego, California, where he gets a decision victory over Alexander Shabliy, someone who had not lost a fight in 8 years, dating back to 2016, had been on a 9-fight win streak, won 16 of his last 7 fights, was undefeated in Bellator with a very, very good resume in his own right within the promotion. And again, it just looks like Usman is one step ahead, if not more. I was expecting a high-level mixed martial arts bout between these two, given their pedigrees, given their well-rounded skill sets, and that is exactly what we got. We pretty much for 25 minutes saw a chess match where one man was waiting on the other to make a mistake and capitalize, and Usman was able to do that much more so than Shabliy was able to. Now, there weren't any crazy big moments, no big scares in this fight per se, but from minute 1 to minute 25, we saw Nurmagomedov get more and more comfortable as the fight went on and just fight his fight, control the fight wherever it went, whether it was the grappling sequences, whether it was predominantly, in this case, the striking, utilizing his range and his reach to his advantage. He is just so talented, and to just be 26 years old, not even close really to those prime years that we see a lot of fighters enter in their late 20s or early to mid 30s. I mean, we could see this guy go 4 more years before truly hitting his physical and competitive prime, which is a scary, scary thought. As for what's next for the champion Nurmagomedov, well, it's kind of confusing because this is the Bellator Champions Series, right? And they were promoting last night the road to Dubai. It looks like there's going to be a big event at some point in 2025 for Bellator and all of their sitting champions. But for me, I just feel like maybe we get another PFL versus Bellator champion versus champion card early on in 2025. Maybe that's what this whole road to Dubai thing is. I was trying to watch both cards at the same time, trying to watch football at the same time. There's a lot happening, a lot of stimulus on Saturday evening, but I know that they are promoting this event in Dubai. So if that is PFL versus Bellator for the second time, like we saw this past February, 7 months ago now, then I think the next logical matchup that makes sense for Usman, being that he's went through this whole division, is he gets the winner of the PFL 2024 lightweight tournament, which is going to be headlined by the number 1 seed Brent Primus, which would be a rematch for Usman Nurmagomedov, and the 2 seed Gadzi Rabadanov. Either of them is going to be the lightweight PFL champion for 2024, $1 million richer, and I think what would await them in their next matchup is a fight with the Bellator champion at lightweight, Usman Nurmagomedov. I really do hope that one day down the line we will get to see Usman truly test himself against the absolute, unquestionable best of the best in the world. Imagine fights in the UFC with him and Islam Makhachev. I know they're in the same training camp, but imagine they were to do that. Or if they weren't, which I understand, him versus Arman Tsarukyan, him versus Rafael Fiziev, him versus Matosh Gamrot, so on and so forth. The list goes on. And again, I'm going to reiterate it for a third time. just 26 years old. He can continue to reign successfully in Bellator for 4 more years, then venture off to a new contract with the UFC and still not even be in his prime yet. I think we have something very, very special here with Usman Nurmagomedov. Many of you would probably agree with that statement. I'm not saying anything that is a hot take by no means. I am excited to see what he can continue to do with this amazing career he's already put together. And as for the rest of the Bellator San Diego card, let's touch on the co-main event where we saw Lorenz Larkin taking on Levan Chokheli in a #1 contender fight in the 170-pound welterweight division. We saw Lorenz Larkin get a finish 1 minute and 53 seconds in, and at 38 years young, he has won 3 of his last 4 fights. All 3 of those victories are via stoppage. The only loss is a split decision to Andrade, who competed in this past season's welterweight tournament for the PFL. Lorenz Larkin is an absolute OG of the fight game, debuting all the way back in 2009, having stints in Strikeforce, in the UFC, and now a long-time career since 2017, as a matter of fact, with Bellator. And now look what the Monsoon will be getting next, a title shot. And I got to give a shout out to Lady Samurai Sumiko Inaba, fighting out of Hawaii, improved to 8-1 with 5 finishes after a nasty finish over Mackenzie Stiller in the second round on Saturday night. All 9 fights of her professional career have been with the Bellator organization dating back to November of 2020. At 33 years old, she's right in her prime right now, and I look forward to seeing what could be next. The whole Bellator thing is weird, right? Because Liz Carmouche is technically still their flyweight champion. She competed in the PFL flyweight tournament. Do we see Sumiko take on Liz Carmouche in a Bellator Champion Series fight in 2025? Do we see Sumiko Inaba compete in the women's flyweight tournament for the PFL in 2025? See, it's hard to really say what is next when we talk about these Bellator specific events that we've been getting this year, but shout out to Inaba for getting a huge win, now on a 2-fight win streak since her first professional loss last November. I'm excited for what's next. She's very well-rounded, very skilled, and looks for the finish. So be sure to give me your thoughts on Bellator San Diego in the comments below. I know there were some other notable victories throughout the remainder of the card as well. Some fighters that remained undefeated, some very closely contested bouts, some big-time finishes, and everything in between. So give me your recap, give me your biggest takeaways from this card in the comments below, alongside what you think is next for the Bellator lightweight king, Usman Nurmagomedov. And from Bellator San Diego, we will transition to UFC Vegas 97. In the welterweight division, we saw number 6 Gilbert Burns, former title challenger, take on the number 8 ranked Sean Brady. They collided. Who got the victory? What is next? Let's talk about it. Sean Brady improved to 17-1 in his professional career and undoubtedly got the biggest victory of his career with a win over Gilbert Burns in a fight that went the distance, 25 minutes, to the detriment of the below average bet slip, but that's a discussion for the social medias. Sean Brady looked very, very good here, showcased his best outing if we want to talk striking and boxing specifically. He used his 5, 6, 7 punch combos to press forward, put Gilbert Burns, on his back foot, and that is what set up the clinch. That is what set up the takedowns, the grappling, so on and so forth. Sean Brady really put all of the tools together here in what was the biggest fight of his career, outside of course, one that's aged quite well, and that loss to Bilal Muhammad in October of 2022. He's had 8 fights in the UFC dating back to October of 2019, racked up a 7-1 record, a few finishes here and there over some pretty notable guys, but big victories as well, whether that be a finish or not. A decision victory over Michael Chiesa, a finish of Kelvin Gastelum last December, and now here against Gilbert Burns, someone who's competed in numerous weight classes in the UFC, competed for a 170-pound title shot, fought the who's who of this welterweight division for many, many years, and Sean Brady made a very, very good performance out of this opportunity, will catapult himself to at least number 6 in the welterweight division, which puts him one step closer to title contention at 170 pounds. However, at this point, The title picture for welterweight is a logjam. The clear next title fight seems to be Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, potentially in December to finish off 2024 for the welterweight calendar, but that leaves Leon Edwards, who just lost the title. That leaves Kamaru Usman, a former champion that's been on the shelf for a little bit now. Shavkat Rakhmonov, as I said, looking to probably be next for Belal. But then you have Jack Della Maddalena, who's been on a tear. Colby Covington still hanging around in the top 5, and Ian Machado Gary. Now, how do we want to go about the welterweight division here? Let's start by taking out 2 people that seem to be the easiest to eliminate. Let's put Belal Muhammad up against Shavkat Rakhmonov. That's the next welterweight title fight. And from there, let's build the blocks at 170. I said after UFC 304 that Leon versus Ian Machado Gary would be an awesome fight. 2 fighters out of the UK, based out of Europe, with their striking credentials, long, rangy, precise, dangerous. I think that should still be next. I know there's rumblings of a potential Jorge Masvidal return to the UFC, and they're eyeballing a fight with Leon Edwards dating back to 2019 where we saw the 3-piece in the soda. That would be cool and all, but I'm not worried about rumors right now. I'm worried about people that are for sure competing actively in this welterweight division. Give me number 1, Leon Edwards. Give me number 7, as of Sunday when I'm recording this recap, Ian Machado Gary. Then that leaves us with 4, Kamaru Usman, Jack Della Maddalena, Colby Covington, and Sean Brady. I think we do Sean Brady versus Colby Covington, to be quite honest with you. Now, I know Sean in the aftermath was saying he wanted to fight Ian Machado Gary. They have the same manager. He thinks Ian's very overrated, wants to humble him. That would be cool. This is a good problem to have if you're the UFC. You have so many fresh matchups at 170 pounds right now that you can't really go wrong. But again, for cleanness sake of this podcast, Leon Edwards, Ian Machado Gary, Colby Covington versus Sean Brady, 2 grapplers, the 2 best outside of the champion Belal Muhammad in this division. Square them up against one another. You have another veteran that's been there and done that versus the guy that's still rising, Colby versus Sean. And then give me the 2 men on the outside of that discussion, Jack Della Maddalena and Kamaru Usman. That takes care of the entire top 7 of the welterweight division for the UFC. Everybody's accounted for. Everybody gets a fresh matchup. You've got veterans versus up-and-comers. You've got the title fight. You have everything you can ask for. I know that it inevitably will not play out this way because it's not a perfect world, but as I just said, this is a good problem to have if you're the UFC, because out of all of those names, you can match them up any which way and get a fantastic matchup. All of them main event worthy. All of them high-level bouts on a pay-per-view. And for the co-main event, let's go to the women's flyweight division where we saw the same exact ranked fighters, number 6 versus number 8. This time for the women, it was Jessica Andrade, former strawweight champion, taking on the surging Natalia Silva. And boy, oh boy, Natalia Silva just continues to evolve and look better and better. The 27-year-old Brazilian will be a future UFC champion. Natalia Silva has not lost since facing Marina Rodriguez on the regional scene back in 2017. She's tallied off 12 straight victories, is 6-0 in the UFC. She has 12 finishes of her 18 career victories, and no win bigger than this one here over Jessica Andrade, where for 15 minutes we saw her be the faster striker, the more precise striker, and the more lethal striker with her powerful kicks, especially with her punches. Now, did she have to eat some shots from Jessica? Yes. Did she have to weather the pressure that Andrade puts on her opponents? Did Natalia have to fight off of her back foot? Yes and yes. And that is exactly what I had predicted on Friday's preview show, where I said Natalia is going to be a future champion, but this is the biggest test of her career. How will she react to what Jessica Andrade presents to her? Well, here in the aftermath, she reacted pretty damn well. She is just so polished and so clean in her striking while still showing an evolution of the rest of her game. Defended takedowns well in this matchup here. You know that she's continually bettering herself with her grappling and jiu-jitsu as well in her camps. Not that she's had to showcase those skill sets much so far in the UFC, but as she continues to climb this ladder, she will eventually have to do so. But she's taking on the challenges placed in front of her and passing them all with flying colors. She cracked into the rankings by beating Andrea Lee. She cracked into the top 10 by beating Viviane Araujo. And now come Tuesday, she will be just near the top 5 after defeating Jessica Andrade. What could be next for Natalia Silva? Let's take a look at the women's flyweight ranks, because we have a championship fight coming up. We have a number 1 contender fight coming up. We have a number 1 contender still just sitting to waiting to get her title fight. This division, it's hard to keep up with. This upcoming weekend, Noche UFC is finally upon us in the Sphere. I'm not going to get into it too in depth because that's what's going to be coming later on this week for the channel, but we have Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso, the trilogy matchup for the women's flyweight championship. We then have Erin Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas competing in the co-main event of UFC Edmonton going down November 2nd. And let us not forget, because I feel like everyone, including the UFC themselves, have forgotten about Manon Fiorot, the clear-cut, true number 1 contender in this women's flyweight division. Let's get the championship fight out of the way. Let's end this rivalry between Grasso and Shevchenko this weekend. Let's then match up Fiorot versus the winner of that trilogy. Then we have Erin Blanchfield versus Rose Namajunas. If Rose beats Erin, I feel like she is for sure going to get the next crack at the women's flyweight title. So that leaves us with Miss Maycee Barber. Now, she was supposed to be fighting earlier on this summer Rose Namajunas in a main event in Colorado. She had to fall out due to injury. In step Tracy Cortez. Namajunas got the decision victory. Now she's fighting Erin Blanchfield. With Maycee having to fall back and not get that matchup with Rose, unfortunately, that kind of puts her a little bit back in the line of title contenders. So who better to face Natalia Silva next than Maycee the future Barber? Are you kidding me? That fight deserves to be a 25-minute main event on a fight night if I've ever seen one. That is action-packed from minute 1 to minute 25, if it even goes the full distance. Maycee Barber, pressure, pace, output, power, finishes over girls like Amanda Hebos. Very notable victories, an insanely long win streak. Now Natalia Silva, big finishes, victories over notable opponents, and also a very long win streak at 6. That's the future of the women's flyweight division to finish 2024, to start 2025. Title fight this coming weekend. Manon gets next. Then we have Rose versus Erin Blanchfield. The winner of that, probably a number 1 contender, especially if it's Rose Namajunas, given her pedigree, given her championship history down at strawweight. Then you have Maycee Barber versus Natalia Silva. Come on. It doesn't get more clear-cut than that. I know I just did the same kind of style format for the welterweight division. That one's way more murky, way more volatile to just get mixed up with. This division, it doesn't get better than that. Those are the matchups. Come on, UFC. Make me look smart here. How about in the featured bout? Steve Garcia, at 32 years old, right in his prime, has now won 5 straight fights in the UFC. All 5 of them are via stoppage. He's 17-5 overall. 14 of his 17 victories are via knockout. He finishes Kyle Nelson 3 minutes and 59 seconds into round number 1. With this win streak, the way in which he is winning these fights, please, please, please give Steve Garcia a ranked fighter next at 145 pounds. In the back half of that division, we have Edson Barboza, we have Dan Ige, we have Bryce Mitchell. Any mixture of those guys is fun for Steve Garcia because he's going to give it his all. He's going to go balls to the wall in order to get a finish, meaning he's putting himself in danger as well. Can he take that fight style and get victories over the elite of the elite? That's clearly the next question here because there's nothing else on the outside of the rankings for Steve Garcia to accomplish. Cody Durden stepped in on literally days' notice to take on Matt Schnell, and he picks up a submission victory via ninja choke just 29 seconds in to that second round. These guys were like rock'em sock'em robots for the first 5 minutes of this fight in round number one. Round number two gets started. Matt Schnell blasts in for a takedown. Cody Durden instantly sprawls, instantly locks in the choke, and he was not letting go of that neck. Cody Durden taking this fight on short notice, up at 135 pounds due to the short notice factor. He's now ended his 2-fight losing streak. And if you want to go outside of that losing streak and look at the grand scheme dating back the last 2 years, he's won 5 of his last 7 fights. Victories over Charles Johnson, Jake Hadley, and Matt Schnell, none bigger than this one on Saturday night. He will now inch himself closer to the top 10 of this division, and the losses are to Tagir Ulanbekov, a top 15 fighter, and a lethal, dangerous Bruno Silva that literally just happened at the end of July. I also want to give a shout out to Matt Schnell. He didn't get his time in the octagon on the microphone, should I say, but he did place his gloves down. It seems as though he will be hanging it up and calling it a career. He has been in some absolute wars in the UFC. I feel like a lot of people won't really appreciate or realize that. So I want to give Matt Schnell his flowers here. Also has one of the craziest comeback victories of all time in the UFC as well. He always came ready to bang and leave it all in the cage. So my hat is off to Matt Schnell. Chris Padilla improved to 2-0 in the UFC with quite literally maybe one of the nastiest, most brutal elbows I've ever seen. He brought his elbow across the top, sliced Rongzhu's eye, and it made the swelling of all swelling, so much so that the doctors had to call it off 4 minutes and 14 seconds into round number 2. At 28 years old, Taco Chris Padilla, 15-6, 13 finishes, only went the distance 5 times in 21 professional fights. He's on a 5-fight win streak outside of the UFC and now into the UFC. This guy is very fun to watch in the lightweight division. Isaac Dulgarian closed Saturday night as a minus 2,400 favorite, one of, if not the biggest favorites in UFC history, and he made it look as such with a one-sided beatdown of Brendon Marotte. He eventually did get the finish, but it came a lot later than most people had anticipated, especially myself, as I had a bet for him to get a victory in under 4.5 minutes. Again, we're not talking about my bets, though. We're talking about the fights and the recaps. He finishes this fight with an arm triangle 4 minutes and 19 seconds into the second round. He's 2-1 in the UFC. He's 7-1 overall with a 100% finish rate. 28 years old. The Midwest Choppa is someone to keep your eyes on at featherweight. Jacqueline Amorim improved her UFC win streak to 3 in a row with a submission over Vanessa Demopoulos, an armbar that came 3.5 minutes into the first round. Not without some controversy, may or may not have been a glove grab on the side of Amorim that kind of led to the setup for this armbar. Vanessa Demopoulos was yelling at the ref that she was grabbing her glove, and in the meantime, Jacqueline just didn't stop setting up her armbar, locked it in. That led to the fight being stopped. However which way you want to go about it, Amorim is a very, very dangerous fighter. 3-1 in the UFC. Her only loss is to a veteran in Sam Hughes, who just refused to tap because Amorim had her in a rear naked choke for 17 minutes, it felt like, in that matchup. 100% finish rate as well. Very dangerous fighter in that strawweight division. And we also saw 2 guys from this most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter go at it, Nathan Fletcher and Ziggy Montas Ramashka. Nathan Fletcher got the second round arm triangle choke submission, so good on him. Looks like he will solidify himself as a UFC fighter. Big time victory for Fletcher. So that is it for today's recap. A combination episode, Bellator San Diego and UFC Vegas 97. Give me all of your thoughts on the main events, especially Usman Nurmagomedov, what's next for the lightweight champion in Bellator, and here for the UFC, Sean Brady biggest victory of his career, 17-1, but in a very, very jam-packed top 5 of the welterweight division. What could be next for him? If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I recap the most meaningful results from every card. I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements, and I break down the biggest storylines and what is at stake for all of the biggest fights heading into each weekend. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA, Instagram, TikTok, and X. And you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple. Every Friday and Monday, podcast episodes released there. Have a great week, and I will see you this upcoming weekend as we have another Bellator event, another Bellator Champion Series event, and we have Noche UFC in the Sphere. It's going to be a big, big week.